Well, good morning, everyone. We're all working from home. We're all navigating this kind of new normal. Element's been really hard at work in the overall community with our clients, making sure that we're informing everyone about cybersecurity. We talk about it a lot when it comes to your organizations, but obviously, working from home, this is kind of a new thing for everyone. And so we wanted to make sure we took some time to bring in a great partner of ours, and that's WatchGuard, to kind of help us just walk through some options that you all have and ways that you can be secure at home and remotely wherever you are. I also want to point out that, each week Element's been on LinkedIn. We've got a company page and we've been posting content every week. My partner Craig's been doing a great job on just step-by-step tips that, are very practical and can help you with, your day-to-day and making sure that you're secure. We're going to do a live security discussion today. It'll be for about 30 minutes, as you know. We've got, as I said, we've got WatchGuard here. They're basically one of our top technology partners here at Element. We have been partners with WatchGuard for close to 15 years now. We really view them as kind of the core of our cybersecurity services that we offer at Element. We're going to be talking a lot about multi-factor today. We're joined by Rick Hannam. Rick is with WatchGuard. He'll be kicking things off for us. Without further ado, because we only have about 30 minutes, I'm going to let you go ahead and dive in, Rick.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate the introduction and appreciate the relationship with Element. One of the key things about my company, WatchGuard, is that we have tremendous partners, and Element is absolutely one of the top partners. So you're in good hands working with those folks. So what we want to kind of just go through relatively quickly this morning is really talking about what the situation that we're in right now. Kind of dubbing it the future of working is now. That's also true that people have been working remotely. I always kind of say that, when this came up, the first thing I thought about was that people have been working remotely, professional employees, for several years now in some capacity. Statistics will say it's somewhere between 60 to 70% professional workers will work remotely at least one day a week or at least sometime during the course of the week. So with that, there's always been a need to protect people who have not been behind the network within the physical building of the company. Sometimes people have addressed it really well and sometimes they haven't. Well, this has forced us into a massive amount of people being out in that remote workforce category. And so with that, it's really kind of brought things top of mind regarding how do we make sure that when someone is not behind our perimeter of our network security and all the great things that we've done to protect our organization, how do we make sure that they are truly secure today when we're doing this en masse, but also really going forward? So this experience has forced people to think about this and really address that. So one of my key points is that anything we talk about today, anything that you do in response to what we talk about today, or anything that you're already doing now in response to the remote workforce being company, will be valuable. It'll be valuable 6 months from now, it'll be valuable a year from now. Once we hopefully get through all of this and people go back to their normal schedules, they still will work remotely occasionally. And so with that, I just want to kind of couch everything that we say as saying, hey, yes, we're talking about things that are important today, but those things will be important in the future as well. One of the keys is business continuity planning and employee safety. And employee safety, we're talking about, cyber safety. We want to continue to address those things always, but this, again, kind of put everything on a heightened level of need to really address those things. And many people have never experienced this type of work before, working from home. Some people do, but many haven't. And so we need to address their, both their, their attitude and also their way of interacting with their corporate asset. And like I said before, once this thing is behind us, we'll never be the same. One of the other elements that has come out of this is that people have said, hey, we realize that people can work remotely efficiently in many cases, not necessarily always. And so there might be more of a push that people want to, either companies and or the individual employees want to continue to do work from home more often. So as I was saying at the onset, that we want to make sure that we address these things today, but we also want to address them going forward so that anything you do today is still valuable as we go forward. So some remote working best practices. As I was kind of mentioning before, many people have never done this before. They've never worked from home. Matter of fact, probably most people have never done it. They've certainly never done it full time. I've been working remotely for 20 plus years. I work out of my home office and travel. So it's normal for me. There was very little change as far as my daily routine, other than I'm not coming downtown to downtown Minneapolis to meet folks like the Element team. But I have seen over the years many people who went into a work from home or a remote working position and failed. And they failed because they just really weren't set up to do so. So some of the simplest things that you could think about in discussing how your staff is really handling the idea of being a remote worker is really important. I've known one of my best friends from college. He on his office days still puts on a suit and tie. I don't do that. I'm in a golf shirt. But things like that help keep people focused. Obviously, setting up a dedicated work area. We've all seen funny videos of people who have had their children or their pets interrupt their Zoom meetings and such is really important. Again, having a dedicated office isn't always available, but trying to have a space that they can make sure that they're working in that area is important. Time management. This really goes back to discipline and employees more or less, again, having the capability or the experience of working from home. And then, obviously people can go crazy if they don't take daily breaks. I have a lake near my house. I occasionally around noon just take a walk around the lake. And then collaborating when people who are normally in an office with 200 or 300 people are not, and they're stuck in their homes like we all are, making sure that we have collaborated ways that people can kind of stay connected for working activities. And then the last one there on this screen is virtual beer pong hangouts. Stay connected. Many people have used that as a way to kind of keep people in that groove and feeling connected to their work and their employees or their coworkers. So, and there's plenty of tools that are currently available. Office 365 is obviously it's a web-based, so that's easy. Google and so on and so forth. A lot of the GoToMeetings, we use GoToMeeting. We're using different tools today. Zoom is certainly a big deal. And then, of course, the remote desktop capabilities for people to be able to connect back to the office through TeamViewer or a remote desktop. Again, video conferencing at all-time high. I was just talking to Jeff and Craig before this about how I'm on my laptop webcam because you can't even buy them today. We've experienced, at least the first couple of weeks of this, that GoToMeeting, which is the service that we use, was very, very overloaded. So people were dropping off and such, which was unusual because it's just not used to the capacity that we're seeing today. So what are the increased risks when a large number of employees are working remotely? Really, it's the fact that they're no longer behind that network security that you have in place, which you have all the great security and all the protocols and technology in place to protect them really well. When they're outside of that, when they're in their houses or when they're in a coffee shop or traveling in the traveled hotels and such like that, that's where the vulnerabilities can be severely increased. Some of the things that they're concerned about is obviously exposed data, but people don't think about lost personal devices or corporate devices that are on the network. Like, for example, mine's a corporate laptop. If I lose this laptop, it could potentially be an issue depending on how well my security is set up. Sometimes people are physically taking home their desktops, computers. In that case, if they're not properly configured for working from a home space, if you just take it from the office and plug it in at home, there's some serious vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. We don't want to do things like VPN split tunneling, separating the home and the corporate traffic, because that can expose a vulnerability as well. Weak passwords and credentials are always an issue. If those weak passwords are out in the wild, meaning, well, I shouldn't say that. If the weak passwords are out in the park or then they're more easily collected and breached, and once they get out in the wild, when folks are working remotely. And then Wi-Fi. We're a security-first company, and our wireless that Element promotes is highly secure. would be very hard pressed to think that too many people who work from home actually have a very robust, secure Wi-Fi network, which again creates a severe vulnerability. And then, if you've got a corporate asset that's at home on a laptop or something like that, outside of the network, they might be accessing things they shouldn't be getting into, and if they do so, they risk picking up malware and such. And then, of course, patch management. If they're outside the network, that patch management that the IT and Element would be doing for them would be less likely to be happening. So just some simple examples. I mean, obviously, we probably are aware that because of COVID-19, there's a lot of malicious cybersecurity activity. Of course, the bad guys are always very opportunistic, or they're going to look for a chance to exploit people and organizations in any way they can. Using social engineering, obviously, if someone is working from home and they're posting that all the time, that is something that someone could see, and they could use those techniques, the social engineering techniques, which is kind of mimicking or kind of digging into someone who is working from home and trying to utilize exploit that information. There's a lot of malicious websites out there that look like legitimate stuff that people are getting drawn into. And then, as we said, the methods that they're using, the bad guys are constantly evolving. Every day they're coming up with new ways for us to try to exploit people. Things that the attack methods that are fairly common are like phishing emails. Obviously, that's an ongoing thing, but it's even more when people are outside of their corporate network because the security controls are not there. The phishing emails often, usually it's the payload is either a link or a malicious attachment, and that's where the malware gets infected. And once it gets one device gets infected, they can infect the entire network. Release scam payment scams. I mean, obviously, people setting up fake websites that look legit, that are trying to let people know the status of their IRS payment from the IRS and from the relief fund. And then working from home scams. Obviously, a lot of people who are no longer working right now are looking for ways to earn money, and there's a lot of fake sites that are basically collecting personal information under the guise of working from home. So some quick steps to build business continuity. One of the things that you want to do is determine the increased risk. As I was just kind of briefly laying out there too, there's a lot of risk when someone is not working behind all the perimeter security of a network. Lay out some rules and guidelines regarding the accepted applications and the platforms that people use. Make sure that you're doing some controls there regarding what they can access and how they should access that data and connect with each other. Using a secure VPN, one of the most important things that you can do, it just really locks in that encrypted tunnel that allows people to connect securely back to the corporate network that you've already got established. And then educating your staff, making sure that you're continuing to inform and educate them. Never assume that they know this stuff. We all know that, especially for folks who are in IT, we know that people, they want to do their job. They don't want to think about IT. They don't want to think about network security. They don't want to think about cybersecurity. They just want to work. And so we can't assume that they're clear in understanding how this works. We need to make sure that we continue to inform them. And then using a multi-factor authentication. We talked about phishing being a serious vulnerability. Well, MFA or multi-factor is probably one of the best ways to prevent that from happening. So let me talk briefly about a product called Offpoint. It is a WatchGuard product through Element. It's our multi-factor authentication site. And the idea is that with one poor password or one breach password, the hackers can get into everything. Once they get a hold of one unit, one particular person's PC or laptop, they can potentially get in and have the keys to the kingdom within your business. So what is multi-factor authentication? If you're not familiar with it, it is two or more factors that authenticate the login of a user. So it's something that which is a password or a PIN, usually associated with the username, so like you would normally log in. And then something you have, either a token or a mobile phone. Typically, we use the mobile phones because it's very, very convenient. That's a little screenshot there that basically when I type in my username and password, this little push notification pops up and I say approve. That means it's me. If that action happens, the amount of the exponential level of increased security by just that little action is huge. It stops the phishing emails. What doesn't stop the phishing emails? It stops using a bad guy using the stolen credentials from a phishing email to be able to actually get in. I tell people all the time, I can give you my laptop, hand you my laptop, give you my username and password, you're still not getting in. And that is really the power of that. So it has to be authenticated that is the correct person using those credentials to be able to get in. And that's true for VPNs. It's true for just single, logging on to the device itself. If I lose my laptop at a coffee shop or a hotel, even if it's stolen, no one's going to be able to actually get into it because of MFA. So there's a protection just logging into Windows, logging into the device right there. They can't even get in. More highly secure things like single sign-on and just trying to single sign, and then the just the authentication to the corporate logins. So provide secure access, probably one of the biggest things. MFA, it securely. If you do VPNs, which are very important, it also secures that connection is legit, and then of course the internal cloud applications. So secure single sign-on SSO. That's really another great benefit about this tool is that once you log in once to the single sign-on, it can log into all your applications. So in our case, it's Salesforce and Bamboo HR and Concur, which is our payment system. All these different things can be logged in one time with single sign-on and allow them to be securely into every single application cloud app. So we are currently, because of the virus situation, our company, WatchGuard, is providing 120 days of free multi-factor authentication off point. Talk to your folks at Element about getting set up on that if you want to do something like that. At the end of the 120 days, if you like it and you see what it's valuable, then there would be a cost at that point in time going forward. It's a very minimal cost. It is not expensive to do this, and it is, in my mind, like I said, the single most important thing that you could do to protect your network for a minimal cost, easy setup and application, and a long-term protection. Because like I said, once we get through this, all of these protections will still be extremely valuable. So I have an IT business continuity checklist, which Elements will be sending out to all of you at the end. But basically, it just kind of goes through some of the steps. Just, do you have these things in place, yes or no? And if not, what actions do you plan on taking? I won't go through every single one of them. You can kind of also get a copy of this as well. But the key is it's really just kind of giving you a checklist of saying, hey, do we have those things in place? And if we don't, should we, or what are we going to do to make sure that those things are in place to protect our networks? Because as I was saying at the onset, and I'll say all the time, is remote workers are a thing that's been going on for a while. It's highly intense right now, but they're still going to be doing it in the future. So it is certainly something to address to make sure that you have a short-term plan, but also something that was going to protect you long-term as well. With that, I will say thank you, and I'll turn it over to Craig Sixta for the next part.
Thanks so much, Rick. That was really valuable. One of the things that I do want to really emphasize is one of the last things Rick mentioned about multi-factor authentication. If that's something that you're not currently doing, that is a game changer when it comes to security. It's not the silver bullet, but it does make it exponentially harder for bad actors to get in. So please look at that. On the note of working from home, as Rick said, things really have changed. One of the things I want to share here really quickly, I'm used to working downtown Minneapolis with hundreds of coworkers. I don't know if you can see that, but my coworker right now happens to be a wood duck that lives outside my office by about 10 feet. So can you see the wood duck, Rick?
Yes, you are on. I see him. Very, very handsome creature there.
She's my coworker now. She's nesting. I can actually see the hole where she is. So things have changed quite a bit. It's very interesting. But what I want to touch on right now is something that Rick talked about briefly, and that is risk. And what I want to talk about is a reasoned response to risk, because as we had so many companies transition to home, some had some really good plans to go to a work from home environment. And unfortunately, some had no plan at all and was just sending employees home and doing the best they can. We're all trying to do the best we can, but there's a reasoned response to risk. We can't panic at every single news article that comes out, and we also can't just ignore every threat that comes through the door. So I want to talk about that briefly. There's a concept in security we call defense in depth, or layered security. And whether you know it or not, you see this all over the place. We have it right now with the COVID response. If you think about it, we have social distancing, stay-at-home orders, testing, masks, hand sanitizers, covering your cough, isolating if you're sick. No one of these things help, but altogether it creates a layer of security. In corporate environments, we have the same thing. We've got firewalls, we have spam filters, we have SIM solutions, antivirus, endpoint protection, policies and procedures. That's great in a corporate environment. But one of the most important aspects of that is what I like to call the human layer of security. I want to talk about that a bit now because the human element is absolutely critical, and it's critical for a time like now because we're no longer under that corporate umbrella. And I guess the first question I'd like to ask, for you to think about, is which of those layers that you had under your corporate protection have been stripped away now that you've shifted your workforce to a remote work environment? My guess is that you don't have next-gen firewalls at every single one of your users' homes. It's possible that your SIM solution isn't collecting logs and analyzing data. And when we go to policies and procedures, are we trusting that our employees are following our policies and procedures, or are we testing them? So some good examples of that as far as reasoned response. One that I love to bring up because people are always so scared about it is right here. Here's my webcam, not the one I'm using right now, but this one is plugged in. You see news article after news article about cover your webcam. You have to have your webcam covered. But the fact of the matter is, if somebody has compromised your webcam, it means that they've also compromised your computer itself. So if they compromise your computer itself, what is the threat there? So in my case, if you were to compromise my webcam, what you would see is probably me. You'd probably get a free concert out of it, something like that. If you compromise my computer, it would be devastating to my business. And so there's a reasoned response there. Yeah, maybe it's a good idea to cover your webcam if your computer's in a public spot or you're having certain conversations, that sort of thing. Also, we've heard quite a bit of news about this. I've got one right in my office. This is an Amazon Alexa. I've got one of those. I've also got a Google Home in here. First of all, if your IT director or your ownership has said absolutely no devices, smart home devices in your office, listen to them. Don't listen to me. But I will tell you, when it comes to a reasoned response, if you see the red circle around here, what a lot of people don't realize about an Amazon Alexa is the button on the top that mutes the mic isn't just a nice little software function. It actually electronically disables the microphone, so it physically it no longer works. Same with the Google Home. So as far as reasonable risk, if I know I'm responsible enough to keep that off, except when I'm asking it to play some music and then shutting it off again, there's not much risk there. If I'm dealing with some highly confidential information and I have it listening, what's the risk? And the risk in this case is Amazon can listen to me potentially. Google could listen to me potentially. There's been very little out there about hackers actually hacking an Amazon and Alexa and a Google. So what's the risk to your organization if Amazon's listening in? There may be risk. You have to assess that. Now, on the flip side, I have my cell phone sitting right next to me. I can tell you it is very easy to turn a cell phone into a listening device. Anyone with some experience can do that. I consider a cell phone to be a much higher risk than an Amazon Alexa or a Google Home in my environment. There are certain clients that I work with that if I'm dealing with a highly confidential conversation, I actually have a Faraday bag next to me, and I take my phone, I put it in the Faraday bag, and that eliminates the threat. That's the idea of a reasoned response. So what I really want you to consider is look at what has changed in your business and assess if this is a threat, what can I do to remediate it, and is it a reasonable threat? We can't be scared of everything, we can't ignore everything. So look at your home environment. What listening devices do you have in your office? Are other people listening? You may be in a business where it's not appropriate for a roommate or a family member to hear what you're talking about. Doesn't matter. The next thing to consider, and Rick touched on this briefly, is shared wireless networks. Odds are you're working on a wireless network. In the case of myself, I am working from home and my wife is working for her company from home. And by default, if we would have just both started doing that, we are both on a shared wireless network. Very few companies would want to have corporate computers on the same wireless environment. So the first thing I did is actually purchased a separate wireless access point and separated the networks. It's a very inexpensive solution that creates two networks so that I don't have the concern of anything happening from their company hitting ours or ours hitting theirs. I talked earlier about, are your employees listening to your work at home guidance? You may have sent them home with a laptop to work from home, but are they actually using that? Was it easier for them to just jump on their home PC because most of your information's in the cloud? I actually have had quite a few people tell me it's not a big deal if I work from my home PC because you have remote virtual desktops that we connect into, or we have MFA and we have remote websites to log into. But think about this. If your home computer isn't only used by you, it does not have the same protection as a corporate environment, you may have device or viruses on there such as keystroke loggers, screen scrapers, things like that. And we have already found those in companies with people who have sent their employees home, or on home computers, we found keystroke loggers. It doesn't matter what else you're using. If somebody's recording what you're typing on your keyboard, that is a huge threat. So test your employees. We sent you home with a corporate laptop. Is that actually what you're working on, or are you working on a different device? Talk about policies around that sort of thing. If you are using home systems, are they fully protected with AV or not? That's a big, big issue. It's very difficult sometimes to extend the corporate AV into the home environment, so there needs to be some guidance. Are they using some free AV off the internet, or are they using something? And then the one that I find humorous, at Element, we have a policy. It sounds somewhat fun, but we have a strict policy that if you leave your computer unlocked, we will change your wallpaper, usually to My Little Pony or something like that. The idea behind it is an unlocked computer can be compromised in about the amount of time that it takes to change a wallpaper. So I've actually extended that to home now that my wife is working at home and I am working from home, because we've got to think about that. If we have multiple people in the home, leaving a computer unlocked is just as dangerous as if we're leaving it at the office. I happen to have 3 teenagers in the house. Not that they're going to do anything malicious, but they may decide to look on my computer, see what I'm looking at. I've got to protect my personally identifiable information of my clients. I've got to protect the information I have. So be thinking of that as you're going through. So when we talk about a reasonable response to risk, I've given you a few examples. Some of them are pretty easy, but look at your home environment, look at how your employees are connecting into your corporate systems, into your SaaS solutions on the internet, and identify what are the real risks. If they're compromised, what would that mean, and what can we reasonably do to protect it? We work with a lot of companies doing this where we'll sit down and we'll actually do tabletop exercises and help them that way to think about these different solutions. So if you have any questions about that, or if you're just lost and going, I really don't know what the reasonable risks are, and I read that Forbes article that says that Zoom's completely compromised and the Chinese are watching everything, we're happy to help. We can help point you in the right direction. We have to keep working as businesses, and if we're going to keep working, it means we need to be on the internet, and at this point, we're working from home. So we are here to help. We'll see if we have any questions. That's all I have. And Jeff Alert, if you want to let us know what we have for questions, that would be great.
Yeah, Craig, we've got one here. You know, between you and Rick, you mentioned the work from home policy, and potentially that's not something that, you know, a lot of companies probably even have put together at this point. But maybe if you can just touch on that. How does someone get started? What does that look like? Should be part of the larger business continuity plan, or should that, or DR plan? Or
yeah, it's interesting. A work from home policy for a lot of companies used to be almost like a contractual agreement with an employee that if you are going to work from home, which is almost a benefit, these are the things that you're going to agree to do so that we're protecting ourselves and we're assuring that you're as effective as possible. Now it's pretty much mandated everybody's working from home. So we almost have to think of it more from the security mindset as opposed to just productivity. But in our work from home agreement, we've got a number of things. One is that you have a dedicated work environment that's dedicated simply to work. It's all too easy. You did see my piano and my guitar back there. They're on the opposite side of the room. I do leave them alone during work time. But for a lot of employees, if they have a TV in their home office, if they have video game systems, things like that, it can be very distracting. The same thing with if you have kids in the house. It's very hard to take care of your kids and work at the same time. So those are some of the more productivity concerns. But then there really is the security concern of your home network is an extension of the work network. When you're VPNing into the corporate network, you're in effect sitting on that corporate network. So what are you exposing the rest of the corporate network to? So we have to think about it from that perspective. There's some great templates out there, and we can also provide some guidance on getting you the first step of the way on that, definitely.
Thanks, Craig. One other question that's come up, and it's related to MFA, multi-factor authentication, which is obviously what Rick touched on with, with AuthPoint. their product, which actually we use at Element ourselves. Would you talk a little bit about how easy is it to implement that? What does that look like? I mean, we're so used to companies, you know, using pizza for a password, or they don't ever want their password to expire, right? Because they can't remember anything. Maybe just touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I did a video on this a few weeks back, a few weeks ago on LinkedIn, if you want to look for it, as far as setting up basic MFA. And so when we're talking about AuthPoint, that's more for a corporate environment. We can protect a lot of different platforms under AuthPoint, and it is very easy for an end user to set up. I won't get into the details of how to set up AuthPoint, but once we've set it up on the back end, it actually makes end users' lives easier, not more difficult. On the more residential or consumer side, Google Authenticator or OpenAuth is kind of the standard out there. One of the key things to know is a lot of you may have text codes coming to you. So when you log into your bank, they text you a code. That's no longer considered secure. Look for the option where you use an application on your phone, and I can actually pull mine up really quick here. I have several of them on here, but the one I use for my home systems here is right there. So what you see right there is my Slack code, and that changes every 30 seconds. So if you know my Slack password, you now have 17 seconds to break into my Slack, so go for it. But the nice part with that is to set that up, all I do is I turn it on in Slack, I scan a little code, and it's ready to go. It's really, really simple to do. And much like you said, we worked one breach this summer that cost a client literally millions of dollars, because an end user had the same PayPal password as they had on the corporate network. And so we can try to train our employees, we can try to trust our employees, but at the end of the day, it's really the responsibility of leadership and security to make sure that we've put protections in place, and MFA is a huge one. That exact same situation, if that employee would have had MFA on their PayPal account, or if they would have had MFA on the corporate network, either side would have prevented that catastrophic ransomware attack.
Hey, and with that, just as Rick here, just adding on to what Craig was just saying, we talk about this all the time. There's a report from Statistica.com that says that 6% of all internet users have the exact same password for every single login. And I thought that was kind of low, so I read into the report a little deeper. 87% of people have a variation of one or two passwords. And so it's, you know, Bob's Burgers 1 2 3, Bob's Burgers exclamation point, whatever. It's a very simple variation of it. Most people do that. The average user has more than 90 logins. So perfect example of what said, if someone's PayPal account or their Facebook account username and password is the same one they use for their corporate network, if they get a hold of that Facebook password, now they potentially have access to the corporate password as well. So MFA, even if they have weak passwords, does protect against weak passwords, because you have to have that second factor, the device. And being on the business side of my technology company, like many people, when we first introduced multi-factor authentication, you know, I kind of, oh God, this is going to be a pain. It is absolutely not. It is the easiest thing in the world, and the level of security increase that you get out of it is exponential. I always kind of say that if an end user can download Candy Crush, they can download AuthPoint. From their standpoint, it's very easy to set up, very easy to use. I use an iPhone, so that little approve thing pops up. Or my Apple Watch, it pops up on my watch, and all I got to do is hit approve. It seems simple. It is simple. It's very inexpensive, but the level, again, like I said, the security that you get from them having that, because if the bad guy has the password and the username, they still can't get into the Facebook account or the corporate login or the PayPal or the bank or whatever it is that doesn't use an MFA. It's huge. I always consider it kind of almost like a no-brainer. Why anybody wouldn't have this today is just, you know, it's just given the cost and given the ease of use, it makes no sense to not have it. So if you don't have an MFA solution, I would strongly recommend that you get that, regardless of whether you use our product or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you, Rick. Craig, thank you. We are up on time. Any remaining questions that were out there, we'll make sure we answer those to you individually. And also, just so you're aware, just a reminder, we will be sending out the information as Rick suggested prior. He's got that great checklist for us all, so we'll get that out to you, as well as make sure we get you the link to our LinkedIn company page where you find these videos that we're doing. And then finally, the free 120-day trial of AuthPoint and those details. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Have a great rest of your week and stay secure.